Tonight, I thought I'd spend some time on Finnish stamps, but I need to emphasize the title, which is Through the Eyes of a Novice. I am not capitalized a Finnish philatelic expert by any means, but I am interested in Finland and I am interested in their stamps. And I thought this was an opportunity to learn something and to perhaps share some of that learning. So the first thing perhaps to clarify is that Finland has two names, Suomi and Finland. Suomi means a land, and or perhaps the people on it. And there is a group of people in Finland called the Sami peoples. And Sami and Suomi are the same root word. So that sort of helped me clarify that particular word. Finland, though, raised a question in my mind, and that comes from an Old English word, finna, which means they think. They're not 100% sure. And linguists at Helsinki University have been working on this for a long time. And the Old English word finna means people of the north. And by that, they're alluding to the Scandinavian people at the time. So some background in terms of those words. Finnish is a bit of no, not a bit. It's an extremely unique language. There are really only three languages, at least major languages, that are related: Finnish, Estonian, Hungarian. There are some sub-languages and some tracing back to Mongolian. And there's certainly some ancient history that would suggest that's where these languages originated, but it's a very distant, very problematic link. However, if you look at those three languages, Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian are related in that manner. Finnish and Estonian are pretty close. Those are not close to Hungarian, and there's no mutual understanding between Finnish and Estonian and Hungarian. There is between Finnish and Estonian, perhaps because they're only an hour and a half, 2 hours away by boat. To give you an example, the word for marriage in Finland is the same word in Estonian for problem. Truth. They are Uralic, Finno-Ugric language group. That word at the bottom is the longest word in Finnish. I am not going to attempt to say it. The one thing that everybody should note is that in Finland, the school system focuses on two primary languages. It's a bilingual country, much like Canada, except that in Finland, everyone learns Finnish and Swedish from the get-go in school. They add English a grade or two later, and most students learn an additional language before they graduate. Those languages vary, but the main ones are German, Russian, and Chinese. It's a little something about Finland and Finns. I think if we're going to understand the stamps of a country, they speak towards the culture of the country and the way the people in that country function. And without question, Finns do things a little differently. They're very considered. They're very calm in their decision making. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that. But the one that comes to mind immediately is the first time I was in Finland. I don't know if you think of this. We don't think of it. When we go into public buildings here, you enter, you pull the door open, and you walk through without a problem. In Finland, you don't. You push the door. So the first thing I did was to pull the door and get nowhere. And the second thing about Finnish doors is that here you have the air stop at the bottom of the door is attached to the door. In Finland, it's attached to the floor. And of course, the first time I walked through one of those doors, I almost went flat on my face. So something that's a little bit different in Finland. One of the hallmarks that Finns will talk about is their silence and their tolerance for silence in conversation and amongst people. And an old joke that I was told was two Finns who hadn't seen each other for 25 years met in Helsinki by accident. And one Finn said to another, how would you like to go for a drink? And the other one said, yes, that would be lovely. So off they went, and they had a drink, and they had several more drinks. And 4 or 5 hours later, they were still drinking. And the first Finn said to the second, so how are you? The second Finn turned to him and said, are you here to talk or to drink? It's really about silence in Finland. And one of the compliments I received was that I could not talk, and I was quite surprised at that because it's not my nature. Anyway, the other thing about Finland that's fairly unique is that, and even today, and there's a link in the PowerPoint at the bottom, Canada can learn from Happy Finland. This is the 7th year in a row that Finland has been named the happiest country in the world. And that is, I think, an achievement given their geographic location and some of the geopolitical realities they're facing. The two pictures there are of the original site of Helsinki, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So why collect Finland? Or at least why I collect Finland? First of all, it's an extremely complex history. And we'll talk about that and some of the implications on the philately of the country. The second is that there's a really interesting postal history there, and there's a couple of glitches in Finnish philately that are strike me as quite interesting. The third is the design quality of the stamps and booklets, and this is, I think, a reflection of the Finnish focus on design. This is a point of national pride, is the architecture and design that Finns have achieved. And again, we'll talk about that. The next reason is that the cost of Finnish stamps tends to be fairly mild. It's not one of those hideously expensive countries to collect, with a couple of exceptions. And of course, they're very available. Finding them might be more of a challenge than the cost, but only in rare instances. Most of them are fairly readily available. And the last reason, and full disclosure here, is I've spent a fair amount of time in Finland. I've been there 9 or 10 times, and I have friends in Finland. So good reasons, I think, to collect the country. Finland is a Nordic country in that it is associated with Norway and Sweden as a Nordic country. It's also Scandinavian in the sense that if you broaden that out, you add Denmark and Iceland, and it's part of that group. Historically, Finland was, and these two photos show the Porvoo hilltop fort. It's a Viking fort, and Finland was not a Viking country. It was a Viking transit point. Vikings moved from the west in Sweden, Norway, and they moved eastward towards St. Petersburg and through the river system to the Black Sea. And Finland was an easy stopping off point. And they built several of these forts. And you can see from the map that they're quite tall, they're quite protected. And from the photo, you can see the sort of moat. It was a dry moat, but certainly a protected moat. The other thing about Finland is the third point, and that's the implication. Oh, and I should say, sorry, second point, Sweden occupied Finland from 1150, or was a province of Sweden, till 1809. It's a significant length of time, and it's left an indelible mark on the landscape and also on the culture. Russia, on the other hand, occupied it from 1809 to 1917, so a much shorter period. Nonetheless, it's had a fairly significant impact on the culture. The map at the left shows Porvoo here at the star and the route that the Vikings might have taken to the east. The darker blue and the lighter blue are what is known as Karelia. Karelia is a province of Finland, and in 1940, the Finns and the Russians attacked, the Finns went to war and with them and defended that area. They lost the lighter blue section to the Russians. The darker blue was maintained as part of Finland. This is a bone of contention for Finland, and I think it speaks to some of the implications for the current geopolitical realities and the current approach in Finland. And of course, that results in Finland. I would say that overall, Sweden, with its long management of the Finnish area, has had much more indelible impact on the culture and the built landscape than Russia did. Uh, you can't avoid Russia, though. To use Mackenzie King's comment about Canada and the US, living next to them is like being in bed with an elephant. You're fine until they roll over. And I think the Finns feel very much the same way. At the same time, there's a reality that Finland feels towards Sweden, much like Canada does to the United States. A larger, more dominant economy, etc. Perhaps like New Zealand feels a bit towards Australia as well. And currently, the geopolitical reality, of course, is that they're next to Russia, and there has been a tit for tat politically about NATO and Finland joining NATO as a result of the Ukraine invasion. And the Finns have taken a very balanced approach. They closed most of the border crossings, and the result was that the Russians decided to send immigrants who had arrived in Russia to the Finnish border. And for some reason, they believed that they had to have transportation to arrive in Finland. And what they gave them was brand new bikes. And these bikes are at the border of Finland and Russia as the Russians brought busloads of bikes and immigrants to the Finnish border to declare refugee status, which eventually has resulted in the closure of the Finnish border. So early Finnish stamps. Two of the things that intrigue me about Finnish philately. First of all, which of these are Finnish stamps? Because when Russia had Finland as a Grand Duchy, they produced stamps for Finland. Which of those are Finnish stamps? And for a long time, it mystified me, but presentations encourage research. If you take a look at that stamp, it's a Finnish stamp. And what tells you it's a Finnish stamp is that dot in the corner. Those 4 dots indicate that it was produced for use in the Duchy of Finland. Likewise, on this stamp, it is Finnish. What makes it Finnish is that series of open dots that surround the shield in the center. And those are Finnish. You notice that they are still in Russian denominations. And here are 2 stamps side by side. So we have the 2 kopeck Russian and the 2 kopeck Finnish stamp with the dots on the right. So those are Finnish stamps, the dots in the corner, the dots around the shield. But these are also Finnish stamps. And they're a bit more challenging only in the sense that you have to read something first. And if you take a look, both those stamps have the abbreviation PEN, Penya, which was the Finnish currency at the time, not the Russian, which was kopecks. So those are Finnish stamps as well. The next interesting thing about Finnish stamps are these early roulettes. It's amazing when you see these stamps, how the roulettes have eroded with time, and finding a perfect stamp. And it's interesting to read Scott Catalog. They'll tell you that stamps with damaged roulettes sell for extremely small fraction of the value. That is not true. Even finding one of these stamps at a price that you can afford is fun. So that particular stamp is type 2. This particular stamp is type 3. So it has the deeper roulettes, more pointed roulettes. What does this make a difference? By the way, this is 1860-74 coat of arms issue. What difference does it make? Well, in the first stamp, 4A to 4B, which is a different kind of roulette, makes a $25 difference, which is neither here nor there if you're purchasing the stamp. However, the second stamp, the difference between Scott Ted and Scott Ted F is a bit more, and those roulettes become particularly important. Interesting. The Finnish coat of arms. If you have a look at it, and certainly Finnish philately, there has been been a lot of stamps that have dealt with the Finnish coat of arms. They're very proud of their coat of arms, and if you take a look at that coat of arms, the lion is treading on a sword. It's a saber. It's a Russian saber, and you'll see it here in that famous series of stamps, the earlier one there, and this wonderful series with 62 plus stamps. It's 62 stamps of Finland, but there are stamps of Karelia that are overprinted, and there are also some airpost stamps that are overprinted on it. And again, they're not expensive. I'm still missing one, but not expensive. And certainly the Americans have been quick to celebrate Finland, and that stamp we all know from 1967 in the United States has the coat of arms on it. So I'd like to take you through some of southern Finland just to compare the stamps with some of the actual buildings. Turku is west of Helsinki, and it was originally the capital under Swedish rule. And this particular building is the castle in Turku. It was built in 1229, and it's, of course, been celebrated on that Finnish stamp from 1929. The road that is highlighted on the map is called the Kungsvägen, or the King's Road, and it was finished in 1480, and it was built by the Swedes as an east-west route from Turku to St. Petersburg. And also in Turku is the cathedral, and also celebrated on that 1929 stamp. We move further east, we come to Helsinki. The turret that's shown beside the map is the original site of Helsinki. And although it's covering the spot almost where the original site of Helsinki was built, it is to the east of the current site. And the reason for that is that it had a wonderful water supply. You can see the waterfalls there. So there was some chance for power and a good settlement spot. It did not have the kind of harbor that current city of Helsinki has. So the three pictures at the bottom are taken from a tower in Helsinki called Torni, which was in the Cold War, the Russian embassy. It's now a restaurant. And the top, it was full of spy equipment. And the top of the tower is where those pictures are taken from. So it's sort of a panoramic view. The three stamps at the bottom celebrate the University of Helsinki. By the way, Helsingfors is the Swedish name for Helsinki. And the University of Helsinki ranks in international rankings just below the University of Toronto. And the picture in the upper right corner, my wife and I were in Helsinki, and we were awake at 3 o'clock one morning, and I went out and took the picture. It is a northern country. It's just over 60 degrees north, and it does have very short days in the winter and very long days in the summer. And that stamp celebrates Suomi, which is on the map. It's a United Nations Heritage Site, UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's the fortress in the harbor that protects the city. Senate Square, indicated on the map with the blue circle, it was designed after the Russians took over, but it was designed by the Finns, by Ernst Strom, and the architect was Bengal. And it was designed on the premise of the redevelopment of Paris that was occurring at the same time. So the cathedral in the center is Helsinki Cathedral, and originally the buildings to the left and right were government buildings. It's now an event venue. And in the stamp history of Finland, this very common stamp, and that is Senate Square. The building in front of the cathedral is actually City Hall. In Finland, I would say, if you count the stamps, there are three national heroes that rank in sort of as the top folk for Finland. The first is Emil Mannerheim. Carl Gustaf Emil Mannerheim. Mannerheim is an interesting character. He was in the Russian aristocracy as a general. He led the revolution for Finland in 1917. He was regent of Finland in 1919. He was general of Finland between the wars, and in 1931 began preparing for the invasion by Russia. He steered Finland's allegiance with the Nazis and the Axis powers. And the reason for that is the proximity to Russia and the concern about Russia. And that, of course, was borne out in the Winter War. Mannerheim was one of the most nimble politicians that I've ever read about. He was able, in 1944, knowing that the Nazis were going to collapse, he was able to pivot his allegiance and to negotiate peace with the UK and Russia. And as a result of his personal reputation, his honor, if you like, he was able to protect Finland from invasion by the Soviets and was able to keep it a democracy. Became president of Finland in 1944 and left in 1946 due to ill health. He's still revered in Finland. And in fact, the black line on the map is Mannerheim Inkatu Street and the main street in Helsinki. And the blue circle is the statue on the far right. The stamp and in fact, on the stamp at the bottom. The stamp in the upper center is the Parliament of Finland, and it is exactly opposite that statue. This, of course, the Americans respect Mannerheim and respected his ability to fight the Russians, and that certainly played into the Cold War. So the first day cover from 1960, just before I was born. The second Finnish hero by stamp count, if you like, and the blue dot indicates the monument to him, is Jan Sibelius. Sibelius was a composer. He composed 7 symphonies. And if you will see a picture of him in a moment, you'll see that the legend is that for each symphony he gained a furrow in his head. And the statue that's shown in the 2 pictures here, both in winter, it was designed about 25 years ago. When it was erected for Sibelius, it was hated by the Finns. The statue itself is made up of pipes that are hollow, and when the wind blows, it plays music. It's remarkable to listen to it. And of course, there's the stamp. And if you look at it in summer, you can see the actual head of Sibelius on the rock and the statue. And if you look at his picture, you can see some of those furrows on his forehead. And for the 75th anniversary of Finland, that's the stylistic representation of the statue. So it has come into favor since it was established. Not unlike the Eiffel Tower or some of the other memorials that have been built. The other thing, or another thing that Finns are very proud of is their design history and some of the design folk that have been known. So the first talk about briefly is Alvar Aalto. There is a university named for him in Espoo. That glass vase is iconic for Iittala Glass, which is a Finnish company. He designed it. And of course, on the bottom is the Finlandia Center. It was intended to be a new downtown for Helsinki. It never became that, but it is a conference center. And it hosted the European Cooperation and Development Security Conference in 1975. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened there. And some of the glassware is pictured on the stamp on the top left. You can see that vase. The other company is Arabia, pictured in the bottom. That's China. And then Marimekko is the cloth and clothing manufacturer and some of the other stuff there. And there's the stamp celebrating that. And of course, one couldn't talk about Finnish design and Finnish industry without talking about Fiskars. Fiskars is the famous knife and cutting. They make scissors, they make garden implements, they make a lot of stuff. They've been around for several hundred years. Stamp at the bottom celebrates Fiskars, and the pictures are of the town of Fiskars itself. Architecture. By the way, the picture at the bottom is not there because either of these architects designed those buildings. It's there to show the sort of Nordic, Swedish influence of architecture in Finland. So it's very much Scandinavian. Eliel Saarinen is sort of the father of Finnish architecture. That there are two pictures of his home, Vittrisk. It is a marvel to walk through. It's very Art Deco in style. It has every element in it with some meaning, architecturally or in literature. And his main contribution to Helsinki was that railway station. It's Helsinki Central Station. It's a classic example of Art Deco architecture. Eliel had a son. There he is on the stamp, 1973. Eero Saarinen. Now, Eero left. He didn't stick around Finland. He went to the United States. And he became particularly famous for three, but others as well, buildings. The first was the TWA Flight Center at JFK. And that's it. The second is the Gateway to the West in St. Louis. Iconic American piece of architecture, if there ever was one. And the third, pictured here on the American stamp, is the Dulles Terminal. Nature, of course, Finland's very much like Canada. It is a shield country. We have the Canadian shield. They have their own shield. It's a land of lakes and trees. Those are taken at a friend of mine's summer house, and that has been reflected in stamps since the get-go. And some of the work is stunning. Movements. So we have here, and you have to write all these down, please. Moomin Papa, Moomin Mama, Moomin Troll, Snork Maiden, Snufkin, Mrs. Fillyonk. This is equivalent to Anne of Green Gables. This is the Finnish equivalent, and it is just an industry unto itself. It's children's stories that have taken on a life of their own. One of the major genesis of Japanese tourism to Finland is Moomins. There's a series of stores across Finland and products available everywhere. And, of course, stamps that show it. The author was Tove Jansson. She wrote from 1945 to 1975, and it's just, as I say, taken on a life of its own, TV shows, etc., etc. There's also some other stuff. In 1952, Helsinki hosted the Olympics. They tried to host them in 1930, the 32 Olympics. They tried to host them in 1940. Of course, they were canceled. And London received them in 1948. And they were assigned them in 1952. And that building is the Olympic Stadium. You can actually climb up the tower if you wish. The third, and I did say there were three, national heroes in Finland. This is Paavo Nurmi. Paavo Nurmi was a runner. He was not just a runner, though. He was a runner. In 1920, he won 10,000 meter cross country and team cross country golds in Antwerp. In 1924, he won the 1,500 and the 5,000 meter golds with 2 hours between those performances. He won the cross country team, and the 3,000 meter team. And in Amsterdam, that was Paris. In 1928 in Amsterdam, he won the 10,000 meter and silvered in 2. This man ran almost constantly. And the statue on the left represents him without clothes, because what he did was run through the forests barefoot with nothing on. He only carried a stopwatch. Every time he ran, he carried a stopwatch. And certainly one of the greatest runners of all times. And in 1952, no one knew, but he carried the torch into the Olympic Stadium, and the international athletes went wild. and there have been several stamps celebrating. Martti Ahtisaari, former president of Finland, a superb negotiator, helped to solve conflicts in Kosovo, worked in the Middle East, founded an organization that's called the Crisis Management Initiative. He's done work in Algeria, work in Palestine, all over the place. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize for that work. And he just died actually last fall. And of course, you can't talk about Finnish stamps without talking about their quizzical and wonderful Christmas stamps based on the Kalevala, which is a Finnish tradition, and also on just that whimsical nature. I will say that the booklets that Finland has produced, I mean, everybody's producing booklets now and everybody's producing souvenir sheets, but the Finnish booklets are remarkable. And they reflect that design quality, and they reflect the elements of the country, nature, history, culture, that sort of thing, as other countries do as well. But this is one I particularly like. Another one here for the World Philatelic Exhibition in 1988. These stamps pictured are the first stamps of Finland. I do not have one of those to show you. And another thing is the Tempelia-Jokio is the church in the rock. And if you're Finnish, please forgive my pronunciation. This was a hole in the ground, quite literally. It was an indentation surrounded by granite. And the Finns decided to build a temple or basilica, really, a church there. And then the stamp reflects it. And it's not far off. If you take a look at some of these photos, it's stunning. The roof of the church is a dome, and it's supported on those struts that you can see. They're all glassed in. The roof itself is made up of 22 miles of copper wire. We're seeing. And of course, fish and the fish culture. And I had to throw in a picture of Kappeli. It was a restaurant opened in 1867. It's still going strong. And worth attending if you're ever there. And I tried to find a stamp showing a sauna, because up till now in this presentation, I haven't mentioned a sauna. But I can't find one. And the only reason I would suggest, perhaps, is that we don't show pictures of our bathtubs. Finns maybe don't show pictures of their saunas, but I'm going to keep looking. So, there. I hope that was okay.